What's going on, everyone? And welcome back to Racially Speaking, where we have real and honest conversations about race as it's viewed through the lenses of faith, family, and vocation. As always, I'm your host, David Phipps, and you're listening to episode 18. Today, my guest is my good friend, Brooke Carroll. I feel like I say this a lot, but I really have been waiting a long time to have her on the podcast. She's one of my OG friends and people who I've processed with, had really helpful, therapeutic, hard conversations with over the past however many years, especially the last two, I think, Brooke. And she's just one of the people whose voice I very much value in general, but specifically pertaining to what this podcast is all about. I think before even starting the podcast, Brooke, you're one of the people that I processed a lot of this stuff with before even getting this up and going. So on a personal level, I'm very happy to have you on finally. We've sitting here on this nice Columbus/Indigenous People Day, which we'll have a laugh about, or already have had a laugh about, that it's both a both and type thing, but is what it is. But I'm excited for this conversation on a personal level, and then excited to talk to Brooke about her job and just what she's been up to lately. So, Brooke, thank you so much for being here and doing this.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, I don't think I've started here in a while with a guest. So, and you know this is coming up. We're not rehearsed or scripted or anything, but I did want to tell you I want to start here. But how are you doing? And more specifically, how would you say your soul is doing? We're going to go deep really quickly here. As a Black woman living in America, especially pertaining to 2020, 2021, just how would you say you're doing? Because I know a little bit you're coming in with heavy heart, so take that for what you will.
Yeah, I think I have felt kind of apathetic recently, almost worried that things won't change, like things pertaining to race relations or politically or medically. Like I really get nervous some days and can get really stuck in that place of feeling like things aren't going to change or that positive things aren't going to happen in those areas. I would say that as a whole, I'm doing better than I have been. But yeah, a lot of apathy recently.
Mm-hmm. What reasons would you say for the apathy? Because I think maybe a lot of people might compare it to 20 months ago or 2 years ago, of where we're at. You know, we got a new president. There's some legislation is changing for better and for worse, but let's say, you know, maybe a lot of people see it as for the better. Why would you say you're still maybe in that place of apathy?
Yeah, so I think the first time I'd ever truly had a conversation with you and with your wife, Caitlin, about race was actually 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. There was a thing that had happened with my brother who is biracial, and we lived in this small town of Radford, where he was named in a crime solely by the color of his skin. They said that brown boy who lives in that yellow house. And that I remember coming over here to watch your kids the time you just had Ollie, and I told you guys about it, and I was just so burdened by that, of like, my brother was named in this, and not named, he was called in this by his skin color. And I don't feel like much has changed since then. And I get that that's only 4 years ago, but I feel like we've not even inched past there. Like, I think people are still on that. People still call people colored. People still call people these just things related to their skin.
Yeah.
And I think that really just bogs me down. And so I kind of get stuck there. And now that I'm raising a biracial child who is darker than me, like, I would say that when I was single and had no children, I didn't worry about this as much because I was like, I can take care of myself. I'll be okay. But now I've got these little lives that I'm supposed to maintain, and it feels heavier. The weight of that feels more burdened. And so now when I leave the grocery store and I take my mask off and I take my daughter out of the like wrap that I put her in to wear her, I just always say like, gosh, I hope you never have to wear a mask. Like, gosh, I hope that there is a day when you can just hold on to the cart and get the free fruit for kids at Kroger and us not have to worry about wiping it off first before giving it to you. Like, I feel really bogged down there.
Yeah, for sure. It's for sure changes with kids. I'll for sure say, or younger siblings even. Anybody you're caretaking for sure. It changes when everything is personal. Absolutely. So yeah, I remember that conversation we had back when you're I think babysitting Ollie, and we're telling us about the incident with your brother. We've had a lot of conversations about kind of your views, and I don't know, for lack of a better term, maybe it's a perfect term, but awakening to your identity as a Black woman.
That's a great term.
Yeah, okay, so you've spent a lot of time, and we've kind of swapped stories often, but you have shared your journey. So you've always been a Black woman, but your awakening, like I said, to that reality and what that means for yourself and just the places you navigate society, the different cultures you navigate. Can we go there a little bit?
Yeah.
So we've used the term, I think, in our conversations, assimilation.
Yeah.
And you would say you spent a lot of your life, if not most of it, assimilating into a culture that wasn't yours. And I think probably for both of us, it's been white culture and often white Christian or evangelical culture. So Can you talk a little bit about that? And where I say this every podcast, but I'm the king of wordy questions, but can you speak into that a little bit of kind of what that's been like to awaken to your identity confidently as a Black woman?
Absolutely. So I think I've always felt like I've been in that space of not Black enough for my I'm biracial, so Black and white, not Black enough for my Black family, not white enough for my white family, but it has always been so much more overbearing for the white side. It's like that one drop policy deal. So like I would always spend Thanksgiving with my mom's family and major holiday around food. And I always knew it was going to be the same thing. Mashed potatoes, turkey, sweet potatoes, green bean casserole, whatever. When I would have holidays with my dad's family, it would be anything. And it would be a very lively event. And it just was never like that with my mom's family. Like, so there was a lot of, kids running around. We'd play dominoes, whatever the heck you call it. And then we'd eat and then we'd leave. That's it. And so, but it always felt like there was a level of disconnect between me and them. Them being my mom's family, the white side of my family. My mom has all Black children. All of her children are biracial. And so we were the ones who were always called on being like, oh, Amanda's going to be late with her kids, whatever. And I didn't know if that was related to race at the time. I don't know. But it just always felt like a disconnect. And I feel like I'm not doing a great job of explaining that. I always felt that, though. I always felt like there was some level of we don't know what to do with Brooke. We don't know, or my siblings in general. I'm just saying my name. But like, we don't know what to do with them. So then I go to my Black family, and I mean, we're all different colors. We are all varying skin tones, and everyone's everywhere. Somebody's in the backyard, somebody's grilling, somebody's talking, but we are all there. I never felt left out there. And so, I mean, I definitely felt more comfortable, but then being raised by white grandparents, I was raised by my dad's parents, and my grandmother ended up marrying a white man who was not my biological grandfather, loved them to death. Like, they greatly accepted me and loved me. My grandmother always made sure that we were exposed to our African American culture, whether that was watching, air quotes, historically accurate movies on Ruby Bridges or the marches in Selma, whatever. I watched all of those films growing up, and She would let me borrow clothes from her friend who is from West Africa, and I would go to school and teach the kids about Kwanzaa. I didn't celebrate Kwanzaa on a regular basis, but my grandmother allowed us to do that. So my white grandmother, who had enough gumption to say, these are my children, this is what they look like, and I'm going to help them celebrate that, was like the most beautiful thing ever. But it was suppressed then when I get to my white grandparents' house, who, oh, you're not just black, you're Irish. Like, your grandmother's family's Irish. That's where you come from. Okay.
Yeah.
Teach me about being Irish then.
Sure.
And they have no information. Like, there wasn't a pride to it. So then when it came to like assimilating, I think a lot of that came from hair for me. Never realizing truly that I have different hair than my white friends and how I needed to take care of it. So when I got to college, I remember some people were like, oh, we're going to have a game night tonight. And it's the very beginning. I think I'm like 3 weeks into school, my freshman year. People were having a game night somewhere. And they were like, oh, you should come. I said, oh, I can't. I get my hair deep conditioned, every couple weeks by this girl who lives in a different building. So this is the people saying this to me.
Yeah.
So you're going to pass up community and like meeting new friends to go get your hair done? I should have in that moment said, well, yeah, I need to take care of my hair. Like, it's the only hair I'm ever going to have. Like, and instead I blew off the girl who does my hair and eventually blew her off too many times that I couldn't go back to her. And then I had to learn how to like take care of my hair on my own. And I just didn't. I like got really lazy with it. So that might seem superficial to some people, but I think if you look at people of color, I mean, our hair is different. They have whole lines dedicated to it. And I didn't know how to take care of it anymore because I didn't have someone showing me. I didn't even learn until high school that my hair was different. When I stopped straightening it every day and actually let it be curly, whatever. And now I have a daughter who has beautiful curly hair, and I had to stop and tell daycare, hey, can you not put rubber bands in her hair? You're going to break her hair. Yeah. You're going to mess up her curl pattern. And I'm trying to learn that now that she's getting hair. So,
because hers is even very different than yours.
Hers is even curlier than mine. Yes. Because she is blacker than I am. I mean, her father is fully black. And so, yeah, just having to learn some of those things. I think that's like a really superficial thing on the outside to look at. But
I think because it could be taken as that is very helpful. That it doesn't always have to be, which I'm going to ask you about some more examples that might go even deeper. But the fact that someone's reaction, maybe even while you're listening right now, could be, oh, that's a small throwaway little superficial thing. Who cares? It's personal and it's cultural. And it's, I think, rooted in, this is a buzzword, but privileged to not have to think about that because... Absolutely. I would say, and you kept using the term different even. I think the culture maybe that we're talking about assimilating into white culture is very much, like that culture is often viewed by people as the culture, I think, and not just we all have different cultures, which I wanted to ask you a little more about because you're talking about navigating on a personal level your white side of your family and your black side of the family. And I think a lot of people hear that and want to sing Kumbaya maybe of like, oh, there's two different, perfect, nice little happy blending of families and they're just different. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, and especially how you're talking about it, it doesn't feel like it was an equal experience, if that makes sense. Like, oh, we're just different and we're bringing all of our differences to the table. Literally you're talking about dinner table at Thanksgiving, but I think that there's more there, right? Because you talked about assimilating. Can you talk a little bit about why it doesn't feel like that? Why maybe people who view it as, oh, that's just a beautiful two cultures mixing and that's it. How it didn't feel like that to you, like why it was different navigating one side than the other. I think you used the term proud or more comfortable with the black side of your family. Can you maybe explain the dynamic there, why you think that was so?
I think some of it was purely a level of hospitality. And
love that word.
yeah, like the more and more I look back at it. So yeah, I mean, my upbringing was far from like, oh, these two families coming together, which most people's isn't. Most people's probably is closer to like mine, where it was that, my grandmother on my dad's side, my paternal grandmother was raised in a generation that did not accept white women to date outside, that didn't accept people to date outside of their race, period. Mm-hmm. So then for her to be this young woman in Pennsylvania, in north central PA, dating black men, subsequently having a black male child, like, she was just seen in a different way. So then when they moved to Virginia and she got with my grandfather, who, she eventually married, white man, all these things. Oh, but he was Mormon. And so that added a whole dynamic to it. Whereas my mom's family is these two white veterans who are Catholic. Mm-hmm. And there was just so many issues even with that, where like they weren't invited to my first birthday party that my mom had for me at my grandparents' home. But they were then later invited to my sister's second birthday, which is a couple weeks later. So it was just this disconnect. And I think my grandmother, my mom's mom, who was just a much harder individual, emotionally and all of that stuff, she would have blamed it on the fact that my grandfather was Mormon. I can't prove that. I can't say, yeah, it was racially driven. But there was absolutely pieces to that. My black family was so willing to bring anyone in. If we had events, if I wanted to celebrate my birthday at my grandmother's house, everyone was invited in. There was no question. My paternal grandmother, there was no question. Everyone was invited. At my grandparents' house on my mom's side, it was not like that. It was very hardened. It was like only our immediate family is here and that's what's going on. And I think that even speaks to kind of the culture at large a little bit. I definitely feel from my time working in the community, like working in community mental health, which we'll dive into deeper a little later. Yes. I was always like invited to sit down and have a meal when I went to, if I had a client who was a person of color, like their families would always invite me down to a meal. White families way more often are like, okay, drop my kid off. Bye. Mm-hmm. Like, or if I was working with adults, all right, see you later. Bye. Like it wasn't this inviting feel. And that's not to say that white people are cold, because that's not the case.
It's not what you're saying.
No, yeah, that's not at all what I'm saying. But there is a difference in, and some of that's ancient African culture. You were much more culturally minded. You were community based in everything that you did. Whereas in more European cultures, that wasn't it. You really did stay to yourself in your own personal flat. So some of that is generational, or, cultural at large.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very helpful. I love the word hospitality. And I think that summarizes a lot of what you're talking about, the difference between, it's not just two cultures coming together, that I think there's a power struggle, which you said is ancient, that is still present. And I'm not just saying that about your family, but when there's cultures, especially if one of them is white and one of them's black community, black culture, Asian culture, Hispanic culture, people of color, when they're coming together, it's different. And partly because of history, but history still informs the present right now. And so I think that, it's a great example of how that is still really, really real and active right now. All right, as you alluded to just a second ago with your job, I would love to get into that some. I'm excited about this. So I always butcher people's titles, so I'm going to let you do that. But you work in mental health. You're a mental health counselor. Maybe I won't butcher it. You're in mental health in corrections. Can I say that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
In corrections. And I got a lot of questions and a lot of things I would love to hear your perspective on. So can you explain maybe a little bit about what you do before I ask the next question?
Yeah. So presently I'm a mental health clinician, like you said, in various correctional facilities. I've previously worked in the community with children and adults in mental health populations, intellectual disabilities populations, autism spectrum, all of that stuff. And right now I do assessments, I do basic check-ins, I kind of help facilitate some psychiatric visits, and really just maintain individual and groups in the correctional institutions that we have around here.
Yeah. Awesome. I feel really lucky that we're such good friends / you have this job, because it gives me like a personal end to, having these candid conversations with you about this stuff. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, seriously, I wanted to ask you about a lot of layers of this job from somebody that knows next to nothing about it. But like many, even listening right now, probably mental health awareness. I've got into this a little bit in past, with some past guests, but mental health awareness, I feel like, is in the headlines all over right
Absolutely.
now. And it's for sure taken off in the aftermath of all the police killings, and specifically since George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, I forget her first name, but Bryant, what was her first name? Ma'Khia Bryant. And just people advocating for mental health, everything. I mean, there's the athletes, which I've talked about in the past, of being advocates for their own mental health and mental health for athletes. But then the mental health advocacy has also come as it relates to arrests, gun violence, de-escalating situations. And a lot of people are just advocating for better mental health and providing mental health clinicians or advocates, I can't think of all the terms, maybe even on site to these situations. So that's a lot, but to me, that's eye-opening, because I would never have, not that I think it's crazy by any means, but I just wouldn't have gone there directly of like, oh, this would be helpful, like, to these situations. So what do you think about the reality we're in right now? Like, people are advocating for that to be the case. There's obviously pushback on that shouldn't be happening, or that's not the answer to what's going on with statistics, arrests, especially of people of color, and shootings of people of color. What do you think about that? Like, what do you think maybe are some things that are true that you think should be addressed now?
I think ultimately some of this is going to come down to, this is going to seem real broad scale. Some of it is going to come down to insurance. So literal mental health, well, just your health insurance. So if we look at who gets mental health services, especially in an area like this, who is it? It's low-income families. It's someone who gets Medicaid. Some people get Medicaid for differing disabilities that are in their home. If someone in the family has a disability, whatever, you're going to have more providers coming into the home, what your insurance is willing to cover. Sometimes people have to commit a crime to get insurance, or not insurance. Sometimes people have to commit a crime or have some type of issue come up that they are then offered services. So if we're looking from a correctional standpoint, some people get offered drug court. If you have a crime that involves drugs, you might get sentenced to drug court. So what that'll mean is you'll have to participate in X amount of hours of outpatient counseling group. That might be 3 hours, 3 days a week. So 9 hours a week. In that, we also expect people to then, you have to keep employment. So they have to be able to work around the schedule. Okay. Most of these groups happen in the evening. Then, say they had a child, and in the process of getting their drug charge or whatever it was, they also got contributing to the delinquency of a minor, or they got a neglect charge or a child abuse charge in the process. Well, then there's providers for them to address that, whether it's like a parent coach or someone like that. But there also might be counselors who are coming in for their kids. So you are asking a person who may or may not have a full-blown issue. I mean, it might have been an isolated incident, but more times than not, someone has a serious drug addiction, and you're asking them to keep employment, manage their children, manage their household, make sure that you're going to work, but also making sure that you're carving out time for these services that are really important to make sure that you don't lose your kids.
Yeah.
You are putting so much on a person at that time to figure out when they are not stable. They're likely not stable enough to handle all of that. So that to me comes down to what we as a society deem important. Yes, they should be getting those services. They should be participating in group, but we need to not make it so stringent. It shouldn't be 9 hours a week plus.
Okay.
I mean, because that's just 9 hours just that the parent or the caregiver, whoever they are, is in group, not including how much time their kids are going to be out with their provider, not including the CPS person or someone from the Department of Social Services having to come in. I mean, it takes over your life. Managing your own mental health or your own addiction then becomes a full-time job.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of that is going to come down to policy changes. And those policy changes need to be that you don't have to be seriously mentally ill or completely impoverished to be able to get a service. Like, we need things that are happening on the front line. And I'm not talking like a DARE program in school. Like, we have plenty of proof that those things didn't work.
Okay.
But giving people an opportunity to pursue services without being so such a penalizing system.
Yeah.
I'm fully for, like, if you did the crime, you have to, account for that, whatever it is, but it shouldn't ruin any chance of you being able to live a life afterwards.
Yeah. Well, but so what I'm gathering is, do you think currently it's too difficult for the people that really need these services to get it, but then when they do get it, or the people that do get it, it's applied in such a domineering way that it's actually not as helpful as it should be?
I would say both. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah,
we are making it almost impossible for someone who I don't like the word just, because I think it sounds demeaning, but someone who just wants counseling, someone who just wants services. We make it impossible for them, or we make it a true financial burden.
Yeah.
Some counselors are just they're not able to bear the weight in private practice of accepting insurance, because there's so much that goes into that. Like, I mean, then you're dealing with the whole party of that. And so if we make it so impossible for them to pursue basic services, and we're so reactionary, then we are then waiting for people to mess up. And in my job specifically, the inmates will often say, "Oh, I'm a paycheck for you." You're not. You are not. And if someone is in my line of work, mental health, period, doesn't just have to be corrections. If you're in my line of work for a paycheck, you are wrong, and you're one of the bad eggs.
Okay.
Because this is not a line of work. This is a line of work where in your job interview and in your acceptance, you accept a headache, and you are now having to figure out within yourself, okay, how am I going to treat that headache to keep myself afloat so that I can help other people? If you don't have that mentality, then you need not be in this business. And I think that we hinge on levels of race because we're looking at this systemically from the beginning, because people were not afforded educations. My great-grandparents, David, maybe even your great-grandparents, whoever, wouldn't have been afforded this opportunity to get an education, to get a job that paid them more, to keep them out of the slums, out of the ghetto, out of whatever. So they maybe had to hustle or do whatever, get involved in something that did not behoove them.
Yeah.
Or did not benefit them. So then that ends them up in positions where, you're going to have different public assistance programs coming in. So, I mean, it is so systemic, and at this point it's cyclical. So tying.
It is systemic.
Oh, for sure. And then, like, tying back to the beginning where I'm like, I just kind of feel apathetic. That is why I feel apathetic. I just feel like
you're sharing, inmates, people you're advocating for, literally coming in already against you with a predisposition of, you're just getting rich off me, which obviously isn't happening, and you're having to, not that you're explaining it to every person that says that, but that's literally not what's happening. Although you understand, I think, at the same time, why they would think that. And that's where the personal element to the reality of systemic issues, I think, lies, which I think is extremely, extremely powerful. And again, you've done a great job saying this. Like, we're not shaming every individual white person, but history and like when we say systemic, is it's set up to disadvantage people of color.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of that every day in your job. Correct.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that, yeah, I'm a statistic in a lot of ways. I'm a biracial woman who's a single mom. Mm-hmm. That's a reality. Like, anyone can look at stats and say that. But I'm also a statistic in that I have a master's degree, and I did that while being a single mom, and I have made a life for myself because I was afforded different opportunities. And some of that might be that I'm white passing in certain aspects. I'm not going to blame that all on my race, but I chose to get up and do that because it was modeled for me as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of people in my life did that. And so when I have an inmate or I have any client coming to me like, oh, I'm just a paycheck to you, I don't shy away to tell them that they're bad eggs and that I hate that they ever have felt like they were solely a paycheck to someone. Yeah. I often now, in the line of work that I'm in, I thank them when they inform me of the misfortunes that they've had to deal with, because I want to do my best to help you. I can't right someone else's wrong, though. Mm. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for people, if you're stepping into this line of work or if you're going to pursue a service, to kind of throw yourself into it a little bit, as far as be ready to kind of get your world rocked in a lot of ways.
So even with your own personal story coming into your job, what are some things that have been eye-opening to you? Because I'm asking that because I think it can, honestly, I'll just be frank, like, easy to hear your story and assume you think all this because you're black, and of course she's gonna say all this. But I think you've done a great job of explaining how what you're navigating, you're both simultaneously aware of being lighter skinned, maybe is sometimes white passing, which has, we could do a whole episode on that, but aware of your privilege or potential privilege at the same time as your enduring racism. Mm-hmm. So it's a both and thing. So can you, almost lost where I was going with that. Can you talk about coming in maybe with your privileged view in some ways and hearing some of the things that have been eye-opening for you since you've done the job?
Some of this will take us back to what we were saying in the beginning with assimilation. There was definitely a time in my life after I became a Christian that I was like, okay, so I have to be a single issue voter now. And I have to vote for whoever is pro-life. And that is, or whoever is against same-sex marriage. And it's like, but what if I don't agree with that? Like, what if in my heart of hearts I don't feel that is what it is? And so there was a time, I would say, in the last election, in the 2016 elections, when Trump ran the first time. Can I say his name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's fine.
When it was the 2016 when it was the 2016 elections, I remember saying to a friend, like, well, I guess I kind of have to vote for him because people really don't like Hillary. And then I had to do a lot of self-exploration of like, no, I don't agree with this. And I don't care what the person at the pulpit says to me about women's reproductive rights when they're not a woman standing up there. I don't care what they say to me about same-sex marriage or just LGBT rights in general, because no, I hold my personal views. This is how I feel about whatever this topic is. This is the path that I have have followed. There it is. And so I'm not gonna fall into that. So then I start working in mental health, community mental health, and I met with like-minded people, like people who are like, we're going to serve anyone. These are people who walk into our doors. This is who is court ordered to see us or voluntarily coming to see us, and this is what we're gonna do. Well, then I step into the correctional realm out here in God's country in Southwest Virginia, and I am not met with that. I am met with inmates are the scum of the earth. If they're a sex offender, I don't care about them. And you're either born a male or you're born a female. And it was like, I'm about to piss some people off. Like that's how I felt walking into work some days. And I think I lost your original question. Am I following it?
Yeah, I mean, this is still very informative.
Okay.
I think the original question was what has been eye-opening since you took the job. But let's go here, I mean, a little bit, because I think it's helpful to pinpoint. This is where I stand. I think it's what you're saying. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. But the voting thing, like, it's not even in along racial lines. We'll try and, I know we both go off in tangents. The racial component. So with single issue voting, for me, I had similar experience in 2016 than 2020. But it's not about, and I've kind of stopped explaining this to people because it's not about the candidate or party or advocating for one side or the other, even though it sort of did turn into that at different points, because I think we're in an extreme situation. And I understand why people hear me say this big, well, we clearly know where you stood, like on who you voted for, stuff like that. I understand that perspective, but what I want to say is, and I think this is what you're saying, is it's not that we're advocating for a side, right? We're advocating for people, and you mentioned the Christian component, that to me, in the last 4 years, 5 years, it has just become overwhelmingly disingenuous and even hypocritical to say these things in the communities we're in of the one issue voting, like pro-life, that's all you need to care about. As if that's the only thing to care about when it comes to humanity.
Oh, yeah.
And we're not here saying that what we're saying is the only thing we should care about, but we're saying it's wrong. And I'll just say, like, unchristian to only think about one issue and to ignore all the other life and death, humane issues to consider when doing something like voting. And it was, and to hear people keep saying that, oh, we just need to leave politics out of it. But in my mind, but we all know what collectively everyone is backing. But now that race or police brutality and the prison system stuff, now that these things are more prominent come election time, that's when we're going to pump the brakes and leave politics out of it. But we're not going to have any problem saying, oh, but let's make sure we don't forget about pro-life. One, that's been, I think, ingrained in us so much, we're not ever going to forget about that. That's where a lot of my conversations and discontentment has been, of like, it's not just, and so then, of course, I'm sure you have similar experiences, Brooke, but bringing this kind of thing up, then it's almost turned around on us of like, oh, well, now you're a Democrat now, or you only care about racial issues. So
you're so liberal.
And yeah, you're liberal, and you're telling me not to care about my conservative issues, and that it's exhausting. And so that's not obviously where I'm camping out. And to be, honest, I've voted. I don't consider myself Democratic or Republican, and I think that things have gone perfectly since Biden became president and Trump isn't president. Absolutely not. Not even close. But to camp out on it's not right, I don't believe, to put on blinders when it's convenient and to focus in on just one thing, which sheds light on the ties to, white nationalism and a certain party that, whether you're there or not, we have to unpack, I think, in Christian culture, especially white Christian culture, to understand humanity more. And I think we've just spent so long not doing that.
Yeah, I think if the first time, because I mentioned like somebody saying something from a pulpit, if the first time your church mentioned anything about a Black life mattering was after May 25th, 2020, so after the killing of George Floyd, they're doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. He was not the first person who ever died in the way that he died. Yeah. Eric Garner, years before, so many people have died in that manner. Literally someone on their neck and they have said, I can't breathe. He wasn't the first person that happened to. And so if that was the first time that your church has said it, then I'm not going to say they're entirely in the wrong, but they weren't doing it right. Mm. They weren't listening. And if they still haven't said it, I'm going to politely ask you to maybe consider having a conversation with your leadership, or maybe you have had a conversation and it's time to exit appropriately. But yeah, I mean, this is such a systemic issue, and it's so cyclical that, yeah, I think you're right. There wasn't something that happened the day that Biden was inaugurated. We're in no better and no worse of a place. Mm-hmm.
Back to the mental health, element where you're at. Do you see, what kind of, do you see your job and the things you see, I guess maybe day to day, do you see racial components, racial lines as far as how mental health is applied and offered everywhere from literally what you do or how inmates or people who are, arrested are treated?
Sometimes. Yeah, I will say, I think this is interesting. So at my current location, I'm the only person of color in my position. Okay. So in mental health. I don't think there's anyone in medical at all. And then we have a handful of Black officers and a handful of Latino officers. And so going just a little bit to my background, I feel like white people always know that I'm not white. Sometimes I may think, she just had, I get the randoms that are like, I just thought you had darker features, like dark hair, curly hair, dark eyes, whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What are you? People of color always know that I'm Black. Mm-hmm. Once again, there's always the handful. Some people might think I'm Puerto Rican or something like that, but more times than not, it's like, okay, I don't know what you are.
People
what are
just
you?
Super interested. Though.
Yeah.
They gotta know.
Yes.
Gotta know.
So with inmates, it's the same way. Any request form that comes from a Black inmate sometimes is like, Miss Carroll, can I talk to Miss Carroll, please? So then I sit down and I talk with them. And sometimes they might be gaming. They're trying to get something, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know how to deter those. But other times I don't feel heard or seen on this compound. And people are not listening to me. I understand that I'm an inmate. I understand whatever it is I did to get here. But I should still be afforded, basic human rights. You are 100% correct. Yeah. And so, more times than not, I do have the inmates that come to me and say that they tell me of the experiences they've had with racism, whether it is they received a charge and a different inmate who is white didn't get a charge for the same thing. I'm thinking institutional charges, not even just in the courtroom, what they're initially sentenced to. But we see that as well. I mean, on such a large scale, I can't say on a personal level that I know where the stats fall on this. But I mean, at large, we know that people of color get far longer sentences than white people. Period. For the same crimes. Yeah. Look at who gets drug court, like I mentioned earlier. It's predominantly white people. Yeah. Black people are told to go and serve. People of color, Black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, are told to serve their time in prison. And that's 100% unacceptable. Mm-hmm. If we are going to see change, we've got to give people a fighting chance. And so, yeah, there is some reform that's happened where, and this is where like other political things are important when it comes to the racial discussion, because we have to look at a candidate who's going to say, I'm going to allow people with convicted felonies to vote. Mm-hmm. And here's how you get your rights back. Here's how you are going to be able to obtain these certain civil liberties that were stripped of you the day that you were labeled a felon. We, and by we, I mean the community at large, have to look at our candidates for that. Yeah. And so, yeah, somebody might call me a single party voter or a single issue voter if I disclose this to them. But yeah, I'm going to look at what are your goals for criminal justice reform? Because I want to know that you are in this to keep people out of prison and out of jails and get them the help needed.
Yeah, something that I've been reading about lately, and I'm reading the book Cast by, I'm forgetting her name, Isabel Wilkerson. Right now I'm in a book group about that book, but one thing she's brought up is the irony, and this again, to just attribute this to white shaming misses the point. She brought up the reality that because of systemic issues, which ties into everything, voting, legislature, everything, because of systemic issues like these disadvantaging people of color, mainly the black community, right now, as marijuana continues to be legalized, there are literally and typically already wealthy white people, mainly white males, were already at the top socioeconomically, are becoming even wealthier, mm-hmm. or wealthy businessmen by profiting off of something that many black men and women are in prison for, serving mm-hmm. 20, 30, 40, 50 year sentences.
For a dime bag of marijuana.
Mm-hmm. For something that's now being legalized, mm-hmm. and white people are profiting off of. So yeah. That's not a shaming thing. It's just a reality that needs to be addressed and corrected. And there's tons of other examples similar to that, but that was really powerful to read about. I felt that's just a reality where like literally is happening as we speak right now that we're living in, and it's the product of racism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like if we look back at that, because, I mean, anyone who was, even though it's legalized now, anyone who was convicted of one of those crimes, they're not getting reparations. They're not even getting their court fees back. Like, mm-hmm. at minimum, their court fees. And they're definitely not getting the last 20 years of their life back.
Kids aren't getting their parents back.
Yep.
Their siblings back. Right?
Yeah.
How, we've unpacked a ton, but how could things best improve? And you shed a lot of light on this already, but how can things best improve along racial lines, do you think, in the prison system? Or with what you do, even specifically, there can be some overlap with counseling. Like, do you have any other things that you haven't touched on?
I think that's going to come from a provider space. So if we can't get legislative change, if we can't get policy change or whatever, that's going to come down to our clinicians, whoever is occupying that position, or even just other positions in mental health, down to your front desk staff or whatever, or in the correctional level, our correctional officers, and our people who run the prison, admin and stuff like that. They need to have a level of cultural competency at its most basic standpoint. Yeah. And I'm not talking about creating colorblind robots. Like, these need to be people who live and breathe understanding cultural differences. So one of the things that I get to do in my job is I get to actually do the annual training for staff. And I love that. I get to do the mental health training for them. Yeah. And it's really my chance to get on my soapbox and say, like, we have to understand that what is culturally normal for us is not always culturally normal for other people, and what defines that normal and all of those things. And so it's my chance to kind of tell our staff, like, you have to take a step back and look at what you're doing and how that is going to impact the inmate that you're working with. If you know that what you're doing is racial and egregious, then you need to take note of that and not do it at its most basic point. But if we educate our staff, if we are educating our mental health providers of tomorrow or even the ones that we have now and, kind of helping them revisit some of these tendencies they may have had or whatever, then I think we could see change. So by some of that, what I mean is like, I have a friend who is in the medical field, and she has talked about how she was taught in her nursing classes that, heart attacks and things like that are much more common amongst Black men. Well, yeah, that might be true, but some of that is from a cultural standpoint. Like, let's look at some of the food that we typically eat. Sometimes it's more like soul food or, more salt content, higher fat content, whatever. Not always, but some of that does come from a cultural standpoint. What did they eat in Africa or in, parts of the Caribbean and stuff like that? They're eating wild game. So that's what they had. So yeah, some of that might be medical predispositions, but it's not that you just have them. It's not that they're just naturally going to get them.
It's not that
more
Black
often.
people were created to have more heart attacks.
Yes, thank you. It's not that Black people were created to have more heart attacks. It's
Which
that,
is the subtext often when people say stuff like that. Right.
Yeah. So like if we change some of this curriculum that we're teaching counselors even, or social workers or anyone that's in a helping professional, if we change that and make it more relevant and culturally appropriate and true, then we would see, hopefully, a change in someone who's a little bit more empathic towards those who they're working with. And I think that we have the capability for that. There's training for officers, and that's both community-based and within the institutions. It's called crisis intervention training. It's called CIT. They do it in the community and for correctional staff.
So so those trainings, are they required?
No.
Right. That's what I just would assume. And so to me, it wouldn't fix everything, but that'd be like, why? This is kind of rhetorical unless you do have answers, but why is that not required in the same way that
your other basic trainings are?
Basic training are. Like, I think that's the huge blind spot, and that, man, that would just change, to me, again, not fix everything, but would change so much. Like, cultural competency, sure, being in the field and in the neighborhoods and getting to know people would be huge. But if there was just more like job, like this is day one, or just, it doesn't have to be day one, but this isn't an elective, right? Like, in education, often the electives that are hard to take or you typically don't have time for are like African American studies, Asian American studies, and stuff like that. Like, that's never required. It's the classics that are required.
Yeah.
And then if you got time, we'll throw these in, and then we'll also advertise that they're available. So it's your responsibility to make sure you take them. But if you're not set up to be able to do that, everyone suffers, right? I asked you, but to me, do you think that would be a huge thing if it was just something of like you leading those things and people with your same job description was a required thing?
I think it could definitely help. I think the answers that you might get as to why it doesn't happen, like why it's not a required training, is that those typically happen outside of the institution, or what
do you mean?
Like, those trainings will happen outside, so they will be down a handful of officers for 3 to 4 days to do that. So that's how maybe places might justify not doing it as often. But no, I mean, I definitely think that they should be doing those annually, and that they should have to, show a level of competency with it as well. Like, doing demonstrations or whatever it is, to help them see them being officers or other professionally mental health trained individuals. Yeah. Because the way that I always put it to the staff is like, you guys are the ones on the first line. I get called after the fact. It's not typical that someone has a panic attack in front of their counselor. Yeah. Like, it's someone else in the community who sees it and then refers them back. And so I think that's just something to keep in mind is like, humans are the ones on the front line. It's not always the professionals.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. Man. This was so helpful, Brooke. My mind's blown. I mean, we've had a lot of these conversations leading up to this, but so informative. Thank you so much for, one, being vulnerable with your personal story, but then giving some super helpful things to listeners and myself, but just things to be aware of. And I feel an extra urgency. I already thought I had an urgency, but urgency to advocate for a lot of the things we've talked about, but in a new way because I understand a little more of the ins and outs of it. Mm-hmm. But man, super, super helpful. Before you go, got to do this. And I mean, what a gamut of transitions emotionally, but I mean, we got to end with some NBA.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I gotta give you that. I just made you go through all this,
all these hard things.
So you'll notice behind you, Kobe hanging above you. So he would be disappointed if we didn't do this.
My office keys at work are number 24. And I always, when I pull them out, and it was assigned to me. Like it wasn't, I got to choose it. And so anytime
it's a little pick me up.
Yes. It's every morning when I take my keys out, 24, Kobe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think if you remind me, you're more of a player person. But do you have a team?
I just really like basketball, so...
Don't worry, like half the people listening already turned us off, so just go for it.
Exactly, yeah. No, I mean, I don't think... right now, I would call myself a Lakers fan because I love LeBron and I love Russell Westbrook. Like,
oh my gosh. That's I've been seeing highlights of them training camp. I can't believe it. Believe it.
Next week.
Yeah, come on over. I'll be watching. Next week. Do you think they're going to get it done?
As in the ship?
Yep. Why are you hesitating?
Because I thought maybe they could have got it done last year and they didn't.
Oh, they got hurt. Okay. They're old. If they're healthy,
if they're healthy, they're unstoppable.
Okay. If they get hurt, sure. Just like anybody, they probably won't. But if they're healthy, I mean, come on. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. Just feels like it was destiny. You know, we got LeBron there. He's healthy.
And then we got the Brody.
Yeah. Russ is back. I mean, he's from LA, but I feel like over these last 10 years, we've been flirting with getting all these guys like Russ, Melo, and now we got them. Mm-hmm. We got Dwight back, and it's just good times.
Dwight Howard?
Dwight Howard's back.
Yes.
He's back. We got DeAndre Jordan. Mm-hmm. Just crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's an excellent... I also just feel like, this is such an aside, but I feel like Russell Westbrook just brings this different energy. And that coupled with the energy that LeBron just has naturally.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's hospitality. Yeah. I mean, if we want to make it relevant to what we just talked about, they live... I feel like, from what I see on the outside, I don't know them personally, but they just live in a hospitality mindset. Like, both of them. Just what they do in the community. And then when you hear other players talk about being on teams with them, like, it's positive. And
no one says anything bad about them.
No.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you can say that Russell Westbrook is a little bit of a hothead, and that happens. But I think he is so playful and great. Love him.
I love him. I'll be real, I've been known by some of my friends in these debates to be a hater on Westbrook from time to time because of his sporadic style of play sometimes. But I have nothing bad to say about him as a teammate. Because it's the opposite. Like, every teammate I've heard that have literally been asked about what it's like to play with him have, like, the nicest, the best things to say about him. He's just a loyal dude.
Have you ever seen another...
I think.
Yeah, have you ever seen another player go and grab, like, that dry mop that they have to do? Like, he literally steps off the court, grabs the mop, wipes up the thing so the game can continue at play. That's a quality human.
He's a misunderstood guy. He's a different breed.
He's weird, but he's great.
I feel sorry for you if you're a journalist, because he'll eat you alive. But, like, don't mess with him with stupid questions. But if you're on his team, like
he's got your back.
He's ride or die. Like the loyalty and the age, honestly, of that Lakers team right now is just, I can't imagine being in the locker room. They're going to be so, like, I think just gelled together automatically. Can they stay healthy all year? I don't know. But
I hope.
I gotta hope. I'll be watching every 10:30 tip-off game here on the East Coast. So I'm about to get even less sleep than I've been getting.
Exactly.
You got any other stories in the NBA coming up that you're following that you're excited about?
I'm actually watching this Ben Simmons stuff a good bit. And I don't know where I fall on it. I don't know how I feel. Sometimes I feel like he's just being selfish. Other times,
Ben Simmons, the
76ers.
almost estranged point guard from is that the right word, from the 76ers?
Yeah, like he didn't want to show up at training, and now they're like, the last update I got was like, developing story. They're trying to get him back, but they're also really trying to trade him.
I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit for this. I've said since he came in the league that I thought he was overrated.
Oh, I think he's so overrated.
I get it. He's 6'10", point guard, can pass to anybody, incredible talent, but he's overrated.
Yes.
With that said, I think the hate on him after the playoffs last year was a little too much. I mean, it felt like he killed somebody. I was like, okay, he laid an egg. He played terribly. He's a little cocky. I get that. I've thought that the whole time. But, whoa, like, we're, like, coming for this guy like he's, committed a crime. I'm like, don't, it's a bit much.
It is.
I think his time's done in Philly. It's got to be done. I don't know how they repair that. I saw that headline, too, and I was like, how is that possible? Like, how could he possibly come back?
Yeah, like, he might report, but they're actually trying to trade him.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, there's no ways. I can't see that happening.
Yeah. And then just as flipping his trades happen, I don't understand why he's still there.
Yeah.
Money, who knows?
The NBA is just crazy. There's nothing like it. The trades are insane.
Yeah, I mean, your jersey set looks like bootleg almost immediately. So
that's why I got to keep my Kobe one, because that's gonna be timeless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say unless someone signs a long-term contract, but even that doesn't matter nowadays.
Yeah.
They could be traded tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or they could decide they want to play somewhere else. It's going to be a crazy season. We're both partial to the NBA. And like you said, keeping it relevant to what we're talking about. They just continue, along with the WNBA. I'll even put WNBA above that. I've said that in the past. But the leagues are leading the way. Not doing everything perfectly, but just leading the way, in my opinion, of navigating, in my opinion, listening to its players who are predominantly black, largely. And just, I know money is involved. I'm not saying money's not involved, but putting, I think, their best foot forward with advocating on whether it's Black Lives Matter or just whatever it is, advocating for the marginalized. As a giant organization, I think are doing it really well if you compare it to their peers.
Yeah. I mean,
NFL,
if you look...
MLB, NHL.
Yeah, if you look at professional sports, this will take us on such a tangent. If you look at professional sports, it looks like combines and stuff like that. Looks like slave trade. If we really want to talk about it.
Wow.
But we don't want to have those conversations. So, yeah, I completely agree with you that, like, the basketball associations, men and women, have done it better from the jump. Like, I don't feel like they had to be prompted to do anything. Yep. You look at the NFL Combine, and it is it looks like slave trade. Like, okay, who can push this harder? Who can pull this more? Who can run faster? Who can do this? Yeah, sure, athletic abilities, but that is also how masters chose their
Well, you
slaves.
brought it up, and I think we said this on a previous episode, but the way the Atlanta Dream advocated for Raphael Warnock in that election, again, wasn't because they're like, oh, let's just get involved in politics and have fun with it and choose our party's side. No, they were fighting for liberation. Literally, they were advocating for Raphael Warnock, but more so, it was a reaction to their owner, who was a previous governor. I forget her name now. Her name escapes me, but had voiced her opinion for being their support of the BLM movement. And so you brought up the parallels to slavery. Like, that's like slave mentality. I look at it as like, I'm your owner. Just keep playing.
Listen to me and leave it alone.
Listen, leave this Black Lives Matter stuff out of it. And man, they did it. They weren't having it. It was a liberating thing that they're advocating for themselves, for sure, but then also, women and players are going to come after them and women that look like them. And WNBA, NBA just continues to lead the way with that. And in my opinion, the divide keeps getting bigger. I think just more and more stuff comes out that of other leagues moving backwards, to be honest. So I just want to give some NBA and some WNBA props. It's not just my love for basketball, but what they're doing. And as soon as that's not the case, I'll jump ship too. But so far it's not the case. And, you know, when stuff comes out about that that's disappointing, I'll be sure to publicize that as well.
Yeah.
But, man, all right, Brooke. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
Have to have you back again, because I know I say that again every episode, but could keep going with a number of things. This was so good. Do you want to do recommendations?
I've thought about what my recommendations would be, because I knew that was like something you did. I'm not too deep into it, but I like it so far. There's a book called His Testimony and My Heritage.
Yeah.
And it's a bunch of different women of color all coming together. They kind of do essays. I think some of them are poetry and stuff like that. I'm liking it so far. Jackie Hill Perry and all of that whole group.
Christina Edmondson. Yep.
Yeah.
So we have a copy of that.
I'm really liking that so far. That's definitely been helpful. And then as far as media goes, there is honestly, I think people can really get bogged down with this and think like, oh, it's just for show. But like the Black Lives Matter collection on Netflix is actually pretty golden.
Yeah.
Okay. Things like, I don't know if this is still on there, but I remember seeing it on Netflix before, but like Fruitvale Station.
Michael B.
Yes. And he's got a new movie coming out soon. Letters to Jordan. Looks good.
It's like a tearjerker.
Yeah. It does. But it also looks like it's going to be good.
Yeah.
But then anything by Ava DuVernay, like she's just incredible. When They See Us, I think people have mentioned When They See Us and 13th. But if you have not watched them, specifically looking at like corrections, I mean, that's huge. There's a whole thing that you could get into as far as just what corrections and the things that happen to individuals when they're incarcerated, how it changes their mental health for both sides of the spectrum. That's a whole thing. And they do a really great job of showing it there. And then just 13th in general is incredible, because she does not shy away. Ava DuVernay does not shy away from even bringing in the opposing side.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Awesome recommendations. I'll try that again. Thank you all for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes for the brilliant recommendations that Brooke just said. Put links to all of those in there, so be sure to check those out. And thank you guys so much for listening.